Hello, and welcome back to Jamie's Man Cave. We've got a beer review for you, home brew beer review, and this one is the gluten-free lentil IPA that I've made. And it's looking a lot better in the glass than it did half an hour ago. So this one has had about 7 days fermenting. Put it into the keg on Friday night, and we are now Sunday afternoon, and I've had to just give it the old forced carb method by cranking up the CO2 a bit, giving it a shake and a roll about, and then leaving it for about half hour, 40 minutes. I did have the gas on over them sort of 2 days, but it wasn't quite enough. It was sat in the fridge, so probably didn't give it long enough or didn't give it enough gas. But now with the forced carbonating, it's juiced it up a bit. So it smells pale ale IPA type, maybe American style because of the hops I used. I've got the Cascade hops in there and some Nelson Sauvin as well. So I did a small demijohn 5 litre batch, and I used 300 grams of toasted lentils, I think 200 grams of gluten-free flaked oats, and 100 grams of rice. Now that was a 30 to 40 minute steep in the Malt Miller electric all-in-one mash tun, just all in the one bucket, and then there was a 30-minute boil with the hops, and that was about it. So yeah, there was Cascade at the beginning, Cascade sort of halfway through that boil at about the 15-minute mark, and then some Cascade and Nelson Sauvin at the very end when I turned it off. So there's a piney resinous sort of scent, or aroma I should say, maybe a very faint citrus, and that's about all you're getting. It's quite light, well, very light in colour, and it is a little bit hazy. It's a bit like a yellowy golden sort of haziness. It was a lot more hazy when it first went into the demijohn. Let's have a taste. Ooh. It is quite bitter. Now I think that's because I made a mistake. After I'd finished the boil, I needed to cool it down, but because it was in the kettle itself, obviously it's got the heating element built into that, I couldn't then, without transferring it into a separate container, which I didn't have to hand to cool down and sort of put in an ice bath. So it was a really cold night. I did it in here in the garage, and it was actually sort of started snowing outside. So I thought if I cover it all up, seal it up, leave it on the back doorstep, it'll soon cool down. That did happen in about 40-50 minutes, but the mistake I made was I left the hop sock in, so that them hops that were put in at the beginning for the bittering have then had that extra sort of 40 minutes, which isn't ideal. But I've ended up with something very hop forward. I did have to increase and add some sugar to obviously help fermentation. So there was, I think by the time I'd put it on to ferment, I think there was maybe about 400 grams of sugar. Yeah, I'd have to check my notepad, which I've left in the house, which is handy, and 100 grams of honey as well at the very end. So it's coming in at about 3%. So I would say that maybe next time I would increase that sugar content, or play about with a different grain, maybe not the lentil, but use something else. I was originally going to do millet, but my first batch went wrong. So if there's one sort of, well, two learning curves as part of this brew, then that would be the sort of standalone single tub mash kettle. I would say always use a hop sock or a strainer, because I threw the pellets in just loose the first time, and they scorched to the element, and it stunk of burning. It stunk of burning hops, which isn't great, and it ruined the first batch. So I lost all the millet. I had to clean it all out, scrape it all off, and start again. So then millet isn't as easy to get a hold of. I had to order it online the first time, but I already had some lentils in, and I'd seen a recipe with lentils, so I tried the red lentils in this, and it doesn't actually look too bad. It's the body is very light, so it's almost, with the lentil, the oat and the rice, it's almost like a very basic and base layer. It doesn't give too many flavours. All the flavours coming from the hop, really, and the fact that I left the hop in probably too long, or longer than I had planned, so I'm getting extra. I'm not sure how it would have turned out if I'd have removed them hops before and let it cool. But there's obviously, from the hop, there's a piney resinous, there's some citrus. It is a slightly bitter. It's not quite as gassy as I would like, and I'm hoping I can play about with that on the keg and increase that. But if you saw the last video where I did the unboxing of the Malt Miller mash tun, because I can't drink beer at the moment, I've been having to sort of have ciders, and it's January and cider's just not really hitting the spot, to be honest. So I haven't been drinking that much, and I just really fancied something with some hop flavour, some beer flavour, and so I thought I'd give this a try. Now obviously in the future, if I can't drink gluten beers and it ends up being that, then there might be other ways of doing it. I could use, regular recipes and then use some of the added enzymes to remove that gluten. Or for the time being, I can't do that, so I've had to use these other grains. I think it's okay. It's okay. It tastes similar to cans of IPA I've had, or cans of sort of American pales that I've had. I could play about with it. I could brew it again, play about with different hops. Oh, there was a dry hop as well. I used the Cascade and the Nelson Sauvin to dry hop for about 2-3 days. It's just slightly bitter, and there's a slight citrusy, almost floral. It's a bit light in the body, but I think, whereas if that was a regular IPA or pale ale, you would get a bit of the grain and the sweetness and some of the other flavours that come through from that, whereas in this you're not quite getting as many flavours coming through, because obviously there's only lentil and oat really. The oat I put in to give it a little bit of haziness, a little bit of body, hopefully help with the head, which hasn't quite, well, it's not too bad, is it? The lentil obviously was the base, and then the rice I just thought I'd try because it's just adds to a lighter sort of beer. As I use it in a lot of American lagers. It's quite difficult to brew with, it doesn't really do a lot, but I thought I'd try it. So there's other options, we can try other things. I've got some quinoa and some buckwheat in the cupboard that I could try. I'm thinking maybe I could try a bitter, but there's also something else that I've been looking at trying, and that is I think it's called a graph, and it's a cider beer hybrid. I've got an apple tree down the garden that, apart from the first year we moved in, when I tried to make a cider and it turned out to be, well, it turned into a hard cider, but that wasn't what I was going for. Apart from that time, all the apples have been sort of wasted over the past couple of years when it comes to the end of summer. So I'm thinking I could play about with something and just buy some pressed apple juice from the shop, maybe brew something like this as a base kit, then mix it sort of 50-50 or 60-40 with the apple juice, test it out to see what it works out like. Obviously could play around with the hops as well then, dry hop wise, see how it works out, and then obviously if that does work, then that's something I could make at the end of summer with my own apples, which is quite exciting. I need to find an apple press though as well, or make one, which is just a pain, but it's an option. So, was it worthwhile? Is it worth a try? I think it's a good experiment to do. I think obviously if you're in a position where obviously there's a gluten intolerance but you can still tolerate gluten-free beers, then they're becoming more and more available, aren't they? And you can also brew your own, add in the enzyme, and be fairly confident that you've brewed yourself a gluten-free beer. So that's always a nice option. But if you can't do that and you need to stay away from them grains and cereals completely, it is an option. It can be done. It needs a bit of playing about with. It's not quite as foolproof as some of the recipes you would get with a all grain recipe kit or a brew in the bag kit. You've got to sort of work out your own options and play around with it. But in terms of hops, it's working. Tastes, you know, it's not just a cold sweet cider that, you know, after the second pint or the second can started to make your teeth feel furry. It's something reminiscent of a beer. It's got them flavours. I was going for like a light pale ale or a light IPA version. As I say, it was 3%. I'd probably try and bump that up next time, and I'd probably have to do that with sugar, unless I could find some version of gluten-free grain syrup or something like that, because I don't think you're going to extract enough from them grains to build it up. And it was a Safale US-05, very clean. There's a lot of hop flavour in there and quite a bit of bitterness, so it's hard to tell. But there's no like homebrew taste. There's nothing like that. It's very clean and light. I see a bit of CO2 in there, a bit of gas. It's perfectly fine. It'd be nice. A nice summer's ale. Yeah. So I'll play about with the gas, see if I can get it pouring perfect, and then I'll have a play about with a few more recipes, and we'll come back and have another beer. I'll see you in the next one. Cheers.